The room smelled of wax and ancient dust as the old man lit the final candle. Shadows twisted and swirled against the cracked walls, their movement unnatural. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. It had been decades since he last saw his brother, but tonight, the veil between worlds thinned. Chanting words forbidden to most, his voice echoed low and guttural. The flickering flame dimmed, plunging the room into a suffocating darkness. A deep growl resonated. It wasn't his brother that answered. Henry sat hunched over in his dimly lit study, the weight of years pressing on his frail shoulders. The room was a shrine to his past. Dusty tomes, faded maps, and relics of old adventures. Now, his world was this crumbling Victorian house, a prison of memories. The silence of the night was broken only by the groans of wooden floorboards and the faint rustle of wind outside. The moon's pale light seeped through the windows, illuminating the leather-bound journal in Henry's trembling hands. The pages smelled of mildew, their edges curling with age. His eyes lingered on the scrawled text, his heart aching. Samuel, his younger brother, his only true companion. Samuel's laughter, his mischief, his unwavering loyalty. They were memories Henry carried like ghosts. On that cold autumn night 50 years ago, Samuel was gone, taken too soon. Henry had carried the guilt ever since, though he had never spoken of it aloud. The manuscript in his hands was unlike any he'd encountered in his years as an archaeologist. Cryptic symbols shimmered faintly under the light. He'd found it decades ago in a jungle temple, buried as if meant to stay hidden. Over years, he pieced together its meaning. It promised the impossible, a way to speak with the dead. Warnings lined its pages, written in hurried, jagged script. "Beware the shadows. They are not what they seem," one note read. Another warned, "The price is always greater than you expect." At first, Henry dismissed them as the ramblings of an ancient mind. But now, as the hour approached, the words filled him with quiet dread. He opened the manuscript to the final page. The instructions were painfully specific. One black candle, a silent room, and a grieving soul. His breath trembled as he struck a match. The flame caught, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Henry hesitated, staring into the fire. What if the ritual didn't work? Worse, what if it did? He thought of Samuel. His brother's bright eyes, his laugh that filled rooms, the way he made Henry feel less alone. The memories silenced his doubt. Henry began to read. The words were guttural, harsh, clawing at his throat as he spoke them aloud. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. A coldness seeped into the room, unnatural and suffocating. Shadows deepened, pooling like ink spilled on the floor. The candle flame flickered as if straining against a growing force. A creak echoed through the house, startling him. It was followed by a profound silence. Henry paused, his heart racing. Somewhere deep within the house, a clock chimed. Midnight. The time had come. For a moment, nothing happened. The room remained still, the candlelight trembling faintly. Then, from the shadows, he heard it. A faint whisper. It was so soft he almost doubted his own ears. Henry. His breath caught. The voice was familiar. Impossible, but familiar. Tears welled in his eyes as he leaned forward. "Samuel, is that you?" The whisper came again, louder now, but colder. There was something off about it, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. The shadows on the walls began to shift, writhing and stretching unnaturally toward the candlelight. Henry's pulse quickened, a chill running down his spine. He realized too late he had not called out to his brother alone. Henry froze, his eyes locked on the candle's flickering flame as the whisper echoed through the room. His brother's voice, or something resembling it, pierced the silence. At first it sounded distant, like a memory carried on the wind. But with each passing second it grew sharper, colder, closer. The shadows on the walls writhed, creeping toward him like tendrils of darkness. "Samuel." Henry's voice trembled, thick with hope and dread. He leaned forward, peering into the void beyond the candlelight. The room felt impossibly vast now, as if the shadows had swallowed the walls. A chill seeped into his bones, and he gripped the desk to steady himself. "Henry." The voice came again, louder this time. It was Samuel's, yet distorted, as though something else spoke with him. Henry's chest tightened as he searched the darkness, his heart pounding. The candle's flame dimmed suddenly, plunging the room into near darkness. A gust of icy wind rattled the window panes, and the shadows surged, coiling together. From their depths, a figure began to emerge. It came slowly, step by step, pulling itself from the void. At first, it was shapeless, but as it drew closer, it solidified. It stood tall, too tall to be human, with elongated limbs and a grotesque, angular frame. Crimson eyes burned from its shadowy face, locking onto Henry with an intensity that rooted him to the spot. "You," it rasped, its voice a cacophony of grinding stone and faint echoes of Samuel. "You called to me." Henry stumbled back, his chair toppling to the floor. "You're not Samuel," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The creature's mouth twisted into a hideous grin, revealing jagged, glistening teeth. "No," it said, amused. "But Samuel is why I'm here." Henry's knees buckled, collapsing onto the floor. What are you?" he managed to choke out. "I am Caleth," the creature replied, its name reverberating through the room. "A gatekeeper. You tore the veil, Henry. You invited me in." "I didn't mean to," Henry stammered, shaking his head. "I just wanted to see my brother." Caleth tilted its head. "Your grief called to me. Now I offer you what you seek, for a price." Henry's blood ran cold. "What price?" Caleth leaned closer, its breath foul and suffocating. "Your soul," it hissed. "In exchange, I will let you see him, hear him. One moment, Henry, and all you've desired will be yours." Henry recoiled, shaking his head violently. "No, there has to be another way. Please." Caleth laughed, a terrible sound that echoed like shattering glass. "Foolish man. You meddle with forces you cannot comprehend, and now you beg for mercy?" It straightened. "Choose quickly. The longer you delay, the stronger the darkness grows." Henry's eyes darted to the obsidian dagger on the desk. Could it stop this creature? Or would it make things worse? Caleth followed his gaze and sneered. "You think that trinket will save you? Try, if you dare. But remember, you brought me here, and I never leave empty-handed." Henry's trembling hand reached for the dagger. Shadows swirled like a living tide, and the demon's laughter reverberated through the room. Henry gripped the blade tightly, his heart pounding. As he raised it, the shadows surged, consuming the candlelight and plunging the room into darkness. Caleth's voice echoed from the void. "Choose, Henry. Speak to your brother, or face the darkness alone." The room hung in suffocating silence, save for the faint thud of Henry's heart. The shadows no longer crept. They loomed, circling him like predators. In his trembling hand, the obsidian dagger glinted faintly in the candlelight. Henry stared at Caleth, his breathing shallow, his mind scrambling for escape. Caleth's crimson eyes burned brighter as it sneered. "Pathetic. You hold the key to your desire, yet you hesitate." Its voice, low and guttural, echoed as if from the walls themselves. "I won't give you my soul," Henry said, though his voice wavered. His grip on the dagger tightened, knuckles pale. "There has to be another way. I just want my brother." Caleth tilted its grotesque head, jagged teeth glinting as it grinned. "Another way? The veil between life and death does not part without cost. Your grief brought me here. Your desperation gave me form. There is no undoing what you've done." Henry stumbled back, his legs trembling under the weight of Caleth's words. The room seemed to grow colder, suffocating him. "I didn't mean to summon you," he whispered. "I only wanted to talk to him." Caleth's laughter echoed, sharp and cutting. "And you shall. But such privilege is never free." It stepped closer, towering over him like a living nightmare. "One moment with your brother Henry, just one. Then your soul is mine." Henry raised the dagger between them, his arm shaking. "Stay back," he said, though his voice betrayed him. His mind raced with memories of Samuel, the laughter, the bond they'd shared. Seeing him again seemed worth any price, but the terror of losing his soul forever rooted him in place. "There must be another way," Henry pleaded. "Take something else. Anything else." Caleth paused, its grin widening as it leaned closer. "You are bold, foolish, but bold. There is another way, but it is not without cost." Henry's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Caleth's burning eyes narrowed. "A soul for a soul. Bring me another, a friend, a neighbor, someone you love. Their life will open the door." The room spun as Henry processed the demand. "I can't do that," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't kill someone." Caleth's grin faded, replaced by a scowl. "Then you have no options left," it growled. "Your soul, their life, or nothing. Choose, Henry, before the veil collapses and your brother is lost forever." Henry collapsed to his knees, the dagger clattering to the floor. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "Samuel, I'm sorry." The room shuddered, the shadows deepening. Caleth loomed above him. "Your time runs short," it said. "Minutes remain. Decide." Henry's hand brushed the dagger. He gripped it tightly, his mind spiraling between despair and defiance. He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't surrender without a fight. Caleth's voice came again, sharp and commanding. "Choose." Henry raised his tear-streaked face to the creature, his fingers tightening around the blade. "Not today," he whispered and lunged. The dagger struck Caleth's shadowy form, but the demon absorbed the blow like mist. Its laughter echoed through the room, sharp and cruel. "Foolish," it sneered, wrenching the blade from Henry's trembling hand and tossing it into the darkness. "You think you can defy me?" Henry fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The shadows loomed closer, pressing against his skin like a suffocating fog. "I won't let you take me," he rasped. Caleth leaned in, its grotesque face inches from Henry's. "You have no choice. The veil is torn, and both your souls belong to me." As the words echoed, the shadows shifted. A faint, mournful voice broke through the silence. "Henry." Caleth's eyes flared with anger. "Silence!" it roared, but the voice came again, louder. "Henry, listen to me." Henry's heart stopped. Within the swirling darkness he saw Samuel. His translucent form flickered, but his eyes shone with urgency. "It's lying to you," Samuel cried. "The ritual, it's a trap." Caleth snarled, its form twisting violently. "Enough!" it bellowed, sending a wave of shadow toward Samuel's ghostly figure. Samuel's form flickered, but he pushed forward. "Henry, don't trust it. If you give in, it'll take me too. It wants both of us." Henry's mind raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of terror. "What do you mean?" he choked out. "I just wanted to save you." Caleth struck, slicing through Samuel's form. The ghost cried out as his image shattered into fragments of light, devoured by the shadows. Henry screamed, reaching out, but his hand met only empty air. Caleth loomed over him, crimson eyes blazing. "Your brother is nothing but a memory. Do not waste your defiance on phantoms." Samuel's warning echoed in Henry's mind. "It wants both of us." You lied to me, Henry said, his voice trembling. This was never just about me. You want him, too. Calith grinned. What difference does it make? Did you think such power came without cost? Henry's gaze fell to the manuscript on the desk, its pages fluttering as though caught in an invisible wind. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with energy. The ritual had brought Calith. Could it also banish it? Calith followed his gaze, its grin fading. Do not think to challenge me, it growled. The ritual binds me, but it binds you as well. Destroy it, and you destroy yourself. Henry hesitated, doubt gripping him. But Samuel's voice echoed in his mind. You have to fight it. With trembling hands, Henry grabbed the manuscript. Calith lunged, its shadowy form surging, but Henry tore a page free and threw it into the candle's flame. The paper ignited, the fire flaring unnaturally bright. Calith's roar shook the walls as its form distorted. The shadows thrashed violently, recoiling from the light. Henry clutched the manuscript and shouted the words scrawled across its pages. You will not take him. You will not take me. The demon let out a final scream as its form dissolved into darkness. The shadows collapsed inward, leaving the room silent. Henry collapsed to the floor, the manuscript slipping from his hands. The candle burned low, its flame flickering weakly. He stared into the darkness, his heart heavy with grief. Samuel, he whispered, I'm sorry. But there was no answer, only the faint crackle of the dying fire. Henry lay motionless on the floor, the manuscript's charred edge smoldering on the desk. The acrid scent of burning paper mixed with the sulfuric stench that lingered in the air. For a moment, he thought it was over. The demon was gone. Silence enveloped the room. Then, from the shadows, Calith's guttural voice emerged. Resilient, but naive, it hissed. The shadows stirred, forming its twisted shape once more. Though smaller and less defined, the crimson eyes burned as fiercely as before. Burning a page will not sever the bond. The veil is torn. I am bound to you now. Henry forced himself to his knees, trembling. I destroyed the page, he rasped. You're weaker. I can end this. Calith laughed, hollow and sharp. You've done nothing but anger me. You've delayed the inevitable. Henry's gaze darted to the remaining manuscript pages. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with unnatural energy. Whatever power had summoned Calith still lingered in those ancient words. What do you want? Henry demanded. Take my soul and leave. Calith loomed closer, its shadow expanding. Your soul is a prize, yes, but not the only one. Your brother remains bound. So long as you resist, his torment deepens. Henry's stomach churned. You're lying, he whispered. Calith chuckled. Am I? You heard his cries. He lingers between worlds because of you. Surrender, and I will free him. He will know peace. The thought of Samuel suffering because of his actions tore at Henry's resolve. How do I know you'll keep your word? Calith's grin widened. You don't, but resist, and his agony grows. Accept, and it ends. The room seemed to close in, the walls pressing against Henry's fragile defenses. Samuel's warning echoed in his mind. Don't trust it. But what if surrendering was the only way to save him? Henry's hand hovered over the manuscript. The glowing symbols pulsed faster as his fingers brushed the page. Calith watched with eager anticipation, its form looming like a dark shadow of inevitability. Go on, the demon purred. End his suffering. Isn't that what you wanted? Henry froze, memories of Samuel flooding back, his laugh, his unwavering loyalty. The idea of condemning him to further torment was unbearable. But what if freeing him came at an even greater cost? He pulled his hand back, his voice trembling but firm. You thrive on fear, but I won't give you the satisfaction. Calith's grin twisted into a snarl. "Brave words, old man, but bravery will not save you." Henry stood, his legs shaking but his determination solidifying. "Maybe not," he said, "but I'll find a way. You won't take him, and you won't take me." Calith's form darkened, its crimson eyes blazing. The shadows writhed, growing like a storm. "Then you will both suffer," it hissed. "You cannot escape me. I will have what is mine." The room trembled as Calith dissolved into the void, its voice fading into the shadows. Henry collapsed into the chair by his desk, his body trembling. The manuscript lay before him, its symbols still pulsing faintly. "I'll fix this," Henry whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'll save you, Samuel. Somehow." The candle flickered weakly, its light barely holding against the encroaching dark. Henry sat slumped in the chair, his body aching as the weight of Calith's words bore down on him. The darkness in the room felt alive, pressing against him. The manuscript lay before him, its faintly glowing symbols pulsing in time with his heartbeat. His reprieve was temporary. Calith would return. Samuel's warning echoed in his mind. Don't trust it, but doubt gnawed at him. What if Calith had spoken some truth? Henry's trembling hands reached for the manuscript. If there were answers, they had to be within its pages. The brittle parchment felt heavy as he turned it. The symbols swirled before his eyes, their meanings elusive despite his years of study. He flipped through the pages, desperate for a solution, a way to sever the bond with Calith. A faint rustling noise broke the silence. Henry froze, his breath catching in his throat. The sound came again, soft and steady, like the turning of unseen pages. His heart pounded as he scanned the room, but nothing stirred. Then he saw it, a ripple in the shadows at the far corner of the room. A pale glow flickered within the darkness. Henry's breath hitched as the light coalesced into a figure. "Henry." The voice was weak, barely audible, but it made Henry's knees buckle. It was Samuel. "Samuel." Henry stumbled forward, his hands outstretched. But as he neared, Samuel raised a trembling hand. "Don't," Samuel warned. "The veil is fragile. Any closer, and it may shatter completely." Henry stopped, his heart breaking at the sight of his brother's translucent, flickering form. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears streaking his face. "I just wanted to see you again." Samuel's expression softened, but urgency burned in his eyes. "Listen to me, Henry. The demon, Calith, it's bound to the ritual. The manuscript is the key, but it's also the anchor. Destroy it completely, and it will be forced back." Henry shook his head. "But Calith said the ritual binds me, too. If I destroy it, won't it destroy me as well?" Samuel's form flickered, his voice fading. "There's a way to sever the connection, but you have to finish what you started." "What do I need to do?" Henry pleaded. "Tell me." Samuel opened his mouth to speak, but a violent gust of wind tore through the room. The candle's flame extinguished and the shadows surged forward, scattering the manuscript's pages. Henry screamed as Samuel's form began to disintegrate, dissolving into the void. "Samuel!" Henry cried, but his brother was gone. Calith's voice boomed from the darkness, furious and mocking. "You dare defy me? Your brother belongs to me, and soon you will as well." Henry stumbled back, gripping the desk for support, but Samuel's final words echoed in his mind. "The manuscript is the key, but you must finish what you started." Henry's gaze fell on the glowing pages scattered across the floor. His hands shook as he gathered them, his thoughts racing. If Samuel was right, the manuscript held the answers he needed, but finishing the ritual could cost him everything. Calith's laughter filled the room, chilling and triumphant. "Choose wisely, Henry," the demon taunted, "for your time is running out." Henry clenched his jaw, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't let Calith win. Not now. Not ever. Henry's hands trembled as he gathered the manuscript pages, their faintly glowing symbols pulsing like a heartbeat. Caleth's mocking laughter echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder of the danger that lingered in the shadows. He laid the pages flat on the desk, flipping through them with frantic urgency. "Finish what you started," Samuel's fading voice replayed in his mind. The manuscript's symbols were as enigmatic as ever, but his fingers paused on a folded corner of one page. Unfolding it, Henry's eyes widened. A diagram of two concentric circles, connected by intricate runes, filled the page. The outer circle's glyphs resembled protective seals, while the inner runes radiated severance and banishment. Could this be the answer? The flickering candlelight cast jagged shadows across the walls, and the darkness in the room felt alive, pressing against him. Caleth's voice slithered through the silence. "You waste your time, Henry. That path will destroy you." Henry's jaw tightened. "You're afraid," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "This is how I stop you." Caleth's form emerged from the shadows, half-formed and flickering, its crimson eyes burning into Henry. "You cannot wield such power," it snarled. "That circle will undo you." Ignoring the demon, Henry grabbed a piece of chalk and cleared a space on the floor. Kneeling, he pushed aside scattered books and papers and began to draw. The chalk scratched against the wooden floor as he worked, every line precise. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he pressed on. Caleth circled him like a predator. "Do you think your scribbles will save you? The veil is torn. You cannot escape me." Henry didn't respond. The outer circle took shape first, its protective seals glowing faintly as he completed them. As he moved to the inner circle, the runes of severance hummed with energy, resonating with the manuscript on the desk. The room grew colder, and the candlelight flickered wildly. Caleth's voice grew louder, more venomous. "Stop this, mortal. You will regret defying me." Henry's hand faltered only for a moment before he continued. The circle was nearly complete, its power building. Caleth lunged, its shadowy form slamming into the outer barrier. The impact sent a shockwave through the room, rattling the windows and extinguishing the candle. Henry cried out, but didn't stop. His hand moved faster, completing the final rune. The circles flared to life, their glow filling the room with brilliant, otherworldly light. Caleth howled, its form twisting as the light forced it back. But Henry's task wasn't done. The manuscript pulsed erratically on the desk, its energy building. Samuel's voice echoed in his mind once more. "You must finish what you started." Caleth's screams filled the room, its voice vibrating with rage. "You cannot win. The veil will collapse and you will fall with it." Henry gripped the manuscript tightly, his heart pounding. If the ritual failed, both he and Samuel would be lost. But if it succeeded, there was a chance to end this nightmare. "I won't let you take him," Henry said, his voice firm. "Not now, not ever." With that, he began to read. Henry's voice trembled as he read the ancient incantation from the manuscript. The words, harsh and guttural, seemed to vibrate in the air as he spoke them. The glowing runes flared brighter, the circles on the floor pulsing in rhythm. The house shuddered as energy built around him. Caleth's voice boomed, shaking the walls. "Stop this! You cannot undo what has been done." The demon slammed into the glowing barrier of the outer circle, sending shockwaves through the room. The protective seals flickered, but held. Henry clenched his teeth and continued, his voice growing louder as he forced the words out. The incantation surged, the ancient syllables searing his throat. The inner circle shimmered with light, its runes humming with power. The manuscript's pages began to smolder, curling at the edges as the energy within them intensified. Caleth recoiled, its form writhing violently. "You think this will save him?" it hissed. "The veil will consume you both." Henry ignored the demon, his focus unwavering. His knees trembled as the room quaked, the air thick with energy. The circles on the floor glowed brighter, illuminating every corner of the room. Calith screamed, its shadowy form shrinking. "Samuel!" Henry called out, his voice breaking. "If you can hear me, hold on." A deafening crack split the air, and light erupted from the circles. Calith let out a final, bone-chilling scream as its form disintegrated, the shadows collapsing inward. The manuscript burned in Henry's hands, its ashes scattering as the light faded. Silence filled the room. Henry collapsed to the floor, his body trembling. The glow from the runes dimmed until only the faint flicker of the candle remained. "Henry?" The voice was faint but unmistakable. Henry's head snapped up. There, standing within the fading light of the inner circle, was Samuel. His form was faint, but his eyes shone with warmth. "Samuel." Henry stumbled to his feet, tears streaming down his face. He reached out, but Samuel shook his head. "You did it," Samuel said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Calith is gone. The bond is broken." Tears streaked Henry's face as he took a step closer. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Samuel's form flickered, the edges of his body fading. "You freed me, Henry. But the veil must close. My time here is over." "No. Stay. I can fix this," Henry pleaded. "You've done enough," Samuel said gently. "You gave me peace. Now you must find yours." The glow from the circles faded, and Samuel's form dissolved. Henry fell to his knees, his heart breaking. "Goodbye, Henry," Samuel's voice whispered. "Thank you." The room grew silent. The candle flickered weakly as Henry sat motionless, grief and exhaustion weighing him down. Calith was gone. Samuel was free. But Henry was alone. For hours Henry sat in the dim light, staring at the remnants of the manuscript. Slowly he reached for the candle, blowing it out. Darkness enveloped the room, but for the first time in years, Henry felt a sliver of peace. He had done what he set out to do. Samuel was free, and though the cost was great, it was worth it. Outside, dawn's faint light crept into the room. Henry whispered a final goodbye, his voice barely audible. "Rest well, Samuel." The dawn's light crept across the wooden floor, filling the room with a soft glow. Henry sat slumped in his chair, the extinguished candle still in his hand. The remnants of the manuscript lay scattered, reduced to ash and fragile scraps. The protective chalk circles had faded, leaving faint, meaningless marks. For the first time in hours, silence reigned. No whispers, no shadows. Calith was gone. Henry exhaled shakily, his body trembling as the adrenaline left him. His mind replayed the night's events. Samuel's face, his voice, the fleeting moments before the veil closed. The weight of it all pressed down on him. But one thought kept him steady. Samuel was free. Henry pushed himself to his feet, staggering toward the desk. His eyes scanned the scattered remnants of the manuscript. The glowing symbols were gone, leaving only faint etchings. Picking up a charred page, his fingers trembled. "What have I done?" he whispered. The ritual had worked, but at a cost. Though he had freed Samuel, he felt as though a part of himself had been left in the void. His soul felt heavy, burdened by what he had unleashed. Birdsong drifted through the cracked window, a sharp contrast to the horrors inside. The world outside was untouched, oblivious to what had transpired. Henry turned to the light, squinting. It was surreal, the calm after so much darkness. With a sigh, Henry gathered the remains of the manuscript. The pages crumbled at his touch, but he couldn't discard them. They were a warning of what he had faced. He placed the fragments in a wooden box and locked them in the desk. His gaze fell on an old photograph on the desk. Two boys grinned, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Henry picked it up, his thumb brushing over Samuel's face. "I hope you're at peace now," he whispered. Tears welled, and he let them fall. Each tear was a release, a small piece of the grief he had carried for so long. Samuel was truly gone this time, but Henry knew he was free. That, at least, was enough. Henry spent the morning cleaning. The chalk lines were wiped away, books returned to their shelves. The deliberate work grounded him. By midday, the room looked as if nothing had happened. But Henry knew the truth. The scars weren't physical. They were etched into his soul. The room might appear normal, but he would carry the night's events forever. As he sat at the desk, he pulled out a blank sheet of paper and a pen. His hand hovered before he began to write. He needed to tell the story. It was his way of honoring Samuel and making sense of the darkness. The words came slowly at first, but as he wrote, the weight on his chest lifted. He poured everything onto the page: grief, guilt, and fleeting hope. He wrote until the sunlight faded. When he stopped, the room was bathed in the warm, orange glow of sunset. Henry leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. The world outside was quiet, offering a chance to begin anew. "Rest well, Samuel," he whispered. "I'll carry you with me, always." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry lit a single candle and placed it on the windowsill. Its glow filled the room, a small, steadfast light in the encroaching dark. The days that followed were quiet. Henry moved through the house like a ghost, each room echoing with memories of the night he faced Caliph. The chalk lines were scrubbed away, the broken furniture repaired, but the scars left behind were not physical. The house was silent now, too silent. The absence of Samuel and Caliph was a void Henry didn't know how to fill. Every night he lit a single candle and placed it on the windowsill. Its glow offered a fragile comfort, a beacon against the encroaching dark. On one such night, as the candle burned low, Henry felt a shift in the air. He froze, his breath catching as a soft golden light flickered in the corner of the room. It grew, forming into a figure. Henry's heart raced as he recognized the familiar shape. Samuel. Not the tormented ghost from the veil, but whole, radiant, and at peace. "Samuel?" Henry whispered, his voice trembling. Samuel's smile was warm. "You freed me, Henry," he said softly. "I wanted to thank you." Henry's tears flowed freely. "I didn't know if I did the right thing," he admitted. "I just wanted to save you." "You did more than save me," Samuel said. "You saved yourself. The bond of grief that held us both is broken. Now we're free." Henry stepped closer, his hand reaching out instinctively. "I miss you," he said, his voice breaking. "Every day." Samuel's light flickered gently, like a reassuring touch. "I'll always be with you," he said, "not as a shadow or a memory, but as part of the light you carry forward." The words settled over Henry like a warm blanket. He nodded. "I'll try," he said. "I'll try to be better." Samuel's smile widened. "You already are. Goodbye, Henry. Thank you." The light faded, Samuel's form dissolving until it was gone. Henry stood motionless, his tears illuminated by the flickering candlelight. For the first time, the house didn't feel so empty. The next morning, Henry woke with purpose. He opened the windows, letting sunlight pour in, and dusted off old photo albums. Each image brought memories, some painful, others joyful, but they were reminders of a life deeply lived. By afternoon, he was in the garden, clearing away weeds that had overtaken it. The work was grounding. As he planted new seeds in the barren earth, he felt a stirring of hope. Weeks passed, and the garden began to bloom. Vibrant flowers filled the space, drawing neighbors who came to chat. For the first time in years, Henry welcomed their company. The manuscript remained locked in the desk, untouched. Henry had no desire to revisit its horrors. Instead, he focused on the present, living each day in honor of Samuel. One evening, as the sun set in hues of gold, Henry lit a candle and placed it on the windowsill. The breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers as he sat by the window, watching the flame dance. "Rest well, Samuel," he whispered. The candle burned steadily, its glow casting warmth across the room. The darkness lingered at the edges, but it no longer had a hold on him. Henry had faced it, fought it, and found his way back to the light. For the first time in decades, Henry felt truly free.